Welcome back to Train Tuesday. I'm your host, Jim Wigan, here with another great month. It's November. It's hard to believe it, but here we are. And besides talking about, for us folks here in the U.S., dreaming about a big meal towards the end of the month, we got some other great stuff we're going to dream about. First, I'm going to do like I always do. I'm going to start out and do some shout-outs and see who's joining us today. We have got Dave, Joel, Anthony, Gary, Kevin, Bradley, Derek Glass is in the house, and stick around, Derek. There's something I'm sure you're going to be interested in. I've got Bradley, D'Angelo, Ian, Eric, Ron. Hey, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Got some great stuff we're going to talk about. We're talking about something we have not done before, and it's new for Athearn. It's the SD59M-2, and I've got a special guest to help me talk about it because this is all new. This is brand new Genesis 2.0 stuff. We're really excited about it, and we're going to share some pictures with you of the actual prototype and get to know a little bit about this retro mod of an SD60M. So it should be a good time. So before we get started, a few more shout outs and then let's get going. We've got Ashley, we've got Jonathan, we've got Joel, Frederick, Christopher, and Kevin. So once again, let's go ahead. Let's assume the position. We'll put the hobby knife down. Grab the beverage of your choice, and let's get started. So like I said, we're talking SD59M-2s this month, and this is all brand new. And this couldn't have been possible without our developer, John. And I've got John here. Let's bring him on board. Hey, John. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good today.
You've been busy.
That's an understatement.
So, I was kind of breaking in the audience a little bit. The SD59M-2, first of all, we've never done it in the Genesis line. I don't think it's been offered in plastic, has it? This was just a brass offering maybe in the past?
I can't even recall a brass version of this yet. I have seen a few folks out there starting to scratch build plastic versions of it, but this is definitely the first plastic version of this locomotive offered.
Yeah, I mean it's not been offered at all, and of course we're doing it in Genesis 2.0, so we're going to have the dual sugar cube speakers, and we're going to have a bunch of lighting functions as well, right?
Yes, definitely. These are getting all the LED light packages that we typically put in locomotives: ditch lights, ground lights, headlights, tail lights.
Yeah, now I know you've done a lot of research on these, but to kind of recap, these were originally, they started life as SD60Ms, which kind of go back to the early 90s, late 80s, and EMD produced a kit where they was it an EMD kit or was it something the railroads did, John?
Well, it started out as an EMD program. As EMD was developing locomotives, they recognized that the smaller railroads are going to want new power for lighter duty use, but the infrequent use or the lighter duty use doesn't always support buying a brand new locomotive. So they were researching ways to rebuild existing frames out there into it. And the SD32 Eco is what developed. And so far, there's basically two frames that they've used. They've used the SD60M. And they've also used the SD45-2 with a conversion. So this was designed by EMD with an entire new electrical package, new prime mover, a turbocharged 710 prime mover in there. And there's enough rebuilds through the locomotive that in the eyes of the FRA, which says after 40 years you have to retire something from interchange, this is new. So they've just added decades of life to these frames because there's such extensive rebuilds that went on for them.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, I guess it's no surprise that UP would be one of the investors in this conversion kit, if you will, because I mean, UP, certainly in North America, the largest railroad, they've got an enormous inventory of locomotives, and for them to be without power would be detrimental to say the least. So That's why we're offering these UP offerings.
Mm-hmm.
And John, I'm looking at this one. This one here is based on one that got finished about 2010, right?
Yeah, I believe that's right. Yeah. A lot of this also came because of environmental regulations. Union Pacific has a fairly large stronghold in California, which tends to lead the nation in environmental regulations. And UP would need new locomotives in order to service that market. So these are Tier 2 compliant, which is a reduction of particulate matters and nitrous oxides. We call it soot. But yeah, it reduces the impact on the environment. Also, they recognize about a 25% fuel efficiency on these, so they go much further on a full tank of gas and diesel.
Sure.
And that's one of the main reasons. So these are often seen on the west coast of the country because that's where the low sulfur fuel they need to fill them. But you'll see them running all over the west.
Yeah, it's really neat to see. I mean, you see this sometimes in the automotive world where they'll take an older truck or car or what have you, and they'll put a modern day, power plant in it. I mean, a 66 Mustang won't get nearly as good as gas mileage as a 2021 Mustang, even though they both have V8s, and this is kind of similar to that. Not only that, but like you're saying, being a Tier 2, emissions is a big thing, and of course it's something we hear about in the news a lot right now. And fortunately, the railroads are kind of taking a proactive stance on this, and it's really kind of cool how you guys picked this out for our next locomotive. It's pretty exciting looking.
Yeah.
Now this other one I just brought up, this one too is 2010. Now we've got some other ones. We're offering 4 in total, and we've got 2 distinct years. We've got 2010. We've also got the 2012, which is a little bit different paint scheme. Let me see if I can bring that up for you guys. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this paint scheme.
Yeah, Union Pacific sent 2 batches of SD60s through the repair program or rebuild program. So that's why there's 2 distinct sets of paint schemes and eras for these. As the initial ones came out with just the Union Pacific logo on the side, and the second batch went through with flags.
Okay. Now, as a rail fan looking at these, a casual observer might not see the differences between this and say an SD60M, but there's one big spotting feature that we're probably all looking at right now. And John, maybe you can tell us a little bit about it. It's kind of centered towards the back, isn't it?
Yeah. So on the SD59s that we're doing, they all have a enlarged flared radiator section, which allows them to run the more efficient, quieter cooling fans back there, but also there's a little bit of emission control going on in that area. So that's a newly built section for the locomotive there.
I also noticed too that when you scroll over to the front, the window that the SD60Ms had in their door, they've removed that. Do you know if that was for a safety reason or why they did that?
Well, I think whenever EMD puts a window in a locomotive, it leaks. And leaking windows cause rust. We saw that in the F units and the E units. All those portholes would rot out the sides of the locomotives. Same thing was happening on the doors of these units. These were in really rough shape. Union Pacific did not pick the cream of the crop to send the rebuild. They picked the rough ones because they were going to be stripped down and rebuilt.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said
not
that.
A huge advantage to the door, window there, so they just put a new door on it.
That's a good idea. And you were talking about how some of these look. Now, fortunately, both John and I had some folks reach out to us, and we reach out to them, and they share pictures of the actual prototype. We're going to share those now, and let's start with I think Kenneth is the first one that sent some pictures in, and yeah, this one's from Kenneth Larson, and yeah, like you said, that's not exactly the cream of the crop of a SD60 60M starting point.
Yeah, You can see, 2518 there was the original. Well, actually, it was the second number of the SD60M, but that's the last number it wore before it became an SD59. You can see the patch on the nose door there where they removed the window. You can see the flared radiator section in primer.
Okay, yeah.
And then also, if you scroll down, you'll see a brand new fuel tank.
Oh.
So one of the other upgrades they did is they put on a safety cell fuel tank, which is very similar to the SD70s. So this is a 4,500 gallon fuel tank.
Okay. Wow. So yeah, that kind of shows some of the differences, and it's kind of neat. This is a great picture because it shows you kind of a before and after in one picture of what the M was and then what it is becoming. I think we've got a top shot from Kenneth as well. Yeah, here we go. This really is a neat picture. This is something that the prototype we don't usually get to see too often.
Yeah, top photos. Take them when you get the chance.
Yeah, exactly. That's really cool. So, this is a project that has been going on for a little bit, and I know you've been working on this for a little bit, but it's at quick glance you might say, just take an SD60M, change this, change that. It's not always quite that simple, is it, John?
No, it's not. A lot of times as a modeler, I would just bring out my razor saw, cut off a part, fit another part, maybe use some putty. But as a manufacturer, we have to look at how long is it going to take. We can't spend 20 hours working on each locomotive.
Sure.
They'd cost the same as an actual car would if we did that. So we have to look at efficiencies in manufacturing, which means tooling additional bodies, additional walkways, additional cabs if we need to remove or adjust a window. And that's one of the reasons why we're not going to be doing number 9900. Originally,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, 9900 was their attempt to reach Tier 4 compliance. So it had a huge, it actually looked like another radiator section, almost like an old dynamic brake blister over the prime mover, which had a catalyst, like a catalytic converter, to further scrub emissions from the locomotive. But it wasn't just that part. There was additional louvers on the side. There was parts that sat on the walkway. For us as a manufacturer, it would mean an entirely new set of tools just to make that one locomotive. And then eventually UP pulled that off and reverted it back to the same as everything else. So it was kind of a short-lived prototype.
Interesting. And I mean, to our audience, I mean, these are some of the things that we've talked about in the past. You really have to look at each specific locomotive and sometimes determine a time and date, because these locomotives, even when they're fresh from the factory, they can change throughout the years on the different railroads, and just subtle differences in details. So I've got a picture. Brian Marsh sent this to us recently, and this looks great. This is 9909. This is a sister to one of the ones that we're releasing. And really, really nice. I don't have a date on this, but I think Brian told us that these are when they were fresh from the paint shop.
Yep. Rolled out in the sun for the first time. It probably still smelled like wet paint.
Yeah, it probably did. Yeah, you can smell that DuPont industrial coatings right now.
Yeah.
So really cool.
You can tell this is an early photo because it doesn't have all the final warning labels that we're seeing on these.
That is true.
They discovered, like anybody who drives a diesel car for the first time, you pull up to a gas pump, you're like, oh, no, I don't want to put gas in there. With the low sulfur fuel, they actually applied bright orange labels around the fuel fill and even on the cab of the door. There's labels saying that you need to fill this with low sulfur fuel.
Yeah, I mean, if you're somewhat older, you might remember purchasing cars back in the old days when they said unleaded fuel only, because
Yeah.
before what 72, I think it was still leaded. Now, one thing I do want to point out to everybody is, if you look carefully, you can see how the sun is hitting the back step here, and you can see how the sun is going through that. Genesis 2.0, we started doing that with our Genesis 2.0 engines a few years ago. So these are some of the details that are going to be available when these come out. And we're looking at December of next year. These will be available to pick up. So you've got till the end of this month, the 26th, day after Thanksgiving, when everybody else is fighting the crowds. Just call your hobby shop and say, hey, you know what? I'd like to get a few of these SD59M-2s.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about these, and it'd be interesting to hear from the folks watching, is the sound on these.
Yeah.
This Tier 2 710 prime mover in this locomotive is actually very quiet. If you are trackside and you have a consist going by, it'll almost sound like these things aren't running after the big GEs go through and the 70 Aces and things like that. I'm hesitant to adjust the volumes down to where it would be prototypically accurate, because I'm afraid people will say that they're too quiet. So it'd be interesting to hear what people want. Do we want prototypical sounds and you might have to adjust them at home, or should we just put them where we think is an adequate volume, and if you want it more prototypical, we can adjust down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, John, because something that a lot of us may not have thought of. These newer, tier locomotives, they don't sound like the old Alcos and first generation, second generation Jeeps that we had. So I got some more pictures to share with you guys. This one, right from our own development department, Janik. You guys have seen Janik before. He picked up some of these pictures. I don't know how recently these were picked up, but this is the other paint scheme that we're offering.
Yeah, these locomotives are only about 10 years old, even though the earliest batch, and because of the low emissions on them, lack of soot, they stay pretty clean. Some of them haven't escaped graffiti, but because they are spending a lot of time out in Southern California where graffiti is prolific.
Sure.
But when you see them, they usually look pretty good, pretty shiny.
Yeah, that's nice. I think I've got one more here from Janik. Yeah. Well, this is exciting, John, because like you were saying earlier, this has not been done in plastic before. It's totally new. Don't think it's just a rebadged SD60M, because just like John was saying earlier, there's things that they have to think about in development and production to make sure all those parts match up to the prototype, but also work for what we're doing. So
yeah,
it's essentially a new piece.
And we'll be using a different Tsunami 2 decoder in these so that we can have the accurate prime mover sound in them. And yeah, that's
cool. Well, John, I know another thing that we've been working on, and both you and Janik have been working on the next project, and that's the SD60Ms. And this is the second time we've done them in Genesis 2.0, and we just wanted to offer some more roads and some differences here. We did UP the last time, but we did a slightly different. Those, if I remember right, John, correct me if I'm wrong, those UPs that we did the last time were more of the as delivered. These are later. These are the yellow cells.
Yeah, each railroad has distinguishing characteristics as they age, and Union Pacific, one of the great ones, is the change from the red sill to the yellow sill after the FRA required frame stripes. UP went to a solid yellow reflective stripe on it. So that really sets the era pretty decisively for them. And there's a lot of variation here. When Union Pacific started this lightning stripe scheme, they changed where the gray and yellow separation was on a lot of their locomotives. The three that we picked are all the same. But some of them, that gray stripe separation was at the bottom of the cab window.
Okay.
So when we look at future versions, that's something we'll consider offering there. 2404 is actually really unique in that if you look at the radiator fans,
Okay.
very early after it was renumbered, it got 2 new radiator fans.
Okay.
And it's lived like those are gray primer, and it lived its entire life with those 2 gray primer exhaust radiator fans. So we decided to model that authentically there.
Nice. So here's one I think is probably dear to both of us. You're from that region. I used to live in that region for a little bit, but the Sioux line, and also this was we had a lot of guys requesting these too, didn't we, John?
Yeah, the Sioux line only bought 5, and it was the last locomotives that they purchased before being folded or acquired part of the Canadian Pacific family. This is the as delivered, which was relatively short-lived, only lasted a couple of years like this, with the strobe, the beacon up on the cab, which is operating, of course, in the Genesis line. But this is, whenever you see the shiny candy apple red photos that are all glossy, this is how that locomotive appeared. So we're doing 2 of the original numbers there.
And then this one's a little different.
Yep. The 3rd number, and we're calling this a Canadian Pacific unit because this represents what the Sioux line locomotives looked like a little bit later in life. When the CP rail system took over for Sioux line, they didn't renumber these because they had, I believe it was SD40-2s in the 6000 series.
Okay.
So they just kept the Sioux reporting marks and applied that badge underneath the cab. But these add the ditch lights to it. They removed a small Sioux that was underneath the headlight.
Oh, yeah.
And then they added that patch onto the side. So if you're looking for Sioux line SD60 with ditch lights, you could remove that printing underneath the cab and add the small Sioux if you wanted, and you could backdate this. And because they only had 5, we couldn't justify doing all variants, all versions in this run, but we'll certainly do them in the future.
Oh, so the Sioux guys out there, yeah, we were listening. Now here's another one that's interesting, and this is part of our Prime for Grime. These are the CIT group locomotives, and I think you guys had fun trying to find these guys. These are interesting.
Yeah, talking about variation differences, there was another CBFX road number that I really wanted to offer, but they changed the headlight housing. And we didn't mold the headlight housing separately on these because all the SD60Ms had the same headlight housing, so we thought we were safe. This one road number had a different one. We'd have to tool an entirely different cab in order to do that one road number, which is unfortunate. We might do it in the future, but that's what we have to look at when we do the Genesis 2.0. We try to get the details correct to the road number, and if we can't offer it, then we have to figure out if we're going to tool something or we just pass on it. These are some of my favorite Prime for Grime units that we've done. When the BNSF,
I like how you did this here, and you said that you've been working with the factory to get this, where they've painted over the original road number, and we all know that's exactly what ends up happening to them.
Yeah, and that was actually BNSF that painted over them.
Okay.
So BNSF renumbered the BN SD60Ms, and then by the time the CIT group took them, a lot of that patching was starting to wear off, and you'd start to see the logos come back through.
Yeah, you can really see it here on the nose of 6025. The stylized BN is just kind of coming through. Really cool. Now these are 2018 on up. We've got another one here, if I remember right. This one's a slightly different variation, still part of the Prime for Grime, though.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I might have to acquire this, even though it's way outside my era. Check out the radiator fans again.
I see this. Yeah, one looks primer, the other one looks blue.
Yep. Yep. This one was definitely patch it up and get it back out there.
Sure.
But this one, unlike the previous version, has the large CIT logo on the side, a different patching on the front.
Very cool. Now, you were talking about BNSF earlier, and this is a road that's still near and dear to my heart. I've always enjoyed the BNSF, and what's cool about this, and John, you know this, when they came out with a Heritage 2 paint scheme back around 2002, that was pretty much going to be applied to wide cab or safety cab units, whereas the Heritage 1 was going to be applied to standard cab, and then you've got this. You've got a wide cab locomotive, but it's in a Heritage 1 style paint scheme. But there's more than meets the eye on these three units that we're introducing, isn't there, John?
Yeah, and the BNSF folks, they're a little bit. There's some variation in what they call the paint scheme heritages. I've heard this one referred to Heritage 4. Mm-hmm. Also as a switcher scheme, because it's black and not green being used here. But it makes sense for the application here because BNSF sent these through a rebuild program with the purpose of actually becoming switchers. Mm-hmm. The numbers we picked, 2 of them, we have lots of photos of these guys out on mainline service. So while they spent quite a bit of time in yards, they also did run through trains as additional pulling power. But what we'll see, the BNSF classified these as SD60M-3s. The electrical package in them was upgraded to the -3 standard, which definitely made them load better and operate better. Externally, there's only a few differences on them. Most notably is an electronic parking brake, which is on unfortunately, the other side of the locomotive that we don't see in our drawings here. But 14, 16, and the next number both have additional labels on it, but they are remote controlled.
So, to everybody out there, Horizon Hobby has all kinds of different items, but Athearn is the only one that is making models of radio control locomotives, which I've actually played around with an RC car and an RC airplane. RC locomotive, that's a whole different game.
Yeah.
So this one here, and John, earlier you were kind of telling me a little bit about these. I didn't know much about the history other than these are former UP. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about these. These are interesting.
Yeah. So Union Pacific was holding on to a bunch of SD60Ms. I think their intention was to send as many of them through the SD59 program as possible, but they kind of capped out at about 28 units. And with PTC coming along, they didn't need as many locomotives, so a lot of them ended up being parked. And now as short lines are growing and wearing out their first generation locomotives, they need new power. And the Union Pacific started selling off SD60Ms to short line and regional railroads. One of the big purchasers so far is the Web Asset Management Group with their reporting numbers WAMX, which is not a leasing company, but a conglomerate of short lines. So these specific units were bought to replace units on the Wisconsin and Southern, because WAMX acquired railroads that the Canadian, I'm going to mess this up, Canadian Pacific, Canadian National, one of those Canadian railroads in northern Wisconsin sold off. So they created a new railroad short line for that, sent a bunch of Wisconsin Southern locomotives up there. And because the Wisconsin Southern operates on PTC territory, they needed PTC equipped locomotives. So these got pressed into service right away with patch jobs. And they're pretty extensive patching.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this one. I'm giving a close up for our viewers, and I mean, this is cool. Not only do we have the faded out armor yellow and the faded out gray, even the red stripe is just totally faded out to almost a pink color. But you've got the patch over here for the reporting marks and the new road number. You've kind of got a gray over the old UP shield.
Yep.
This is really cool. This is going to be unique.
Yeah. When you see photos of this in real life, the opposite side actually has a very repetitive patch pattern on the fuel tank that we're also going to replicate, where they obviously were fixing some weld points on it. 6022 is definitely a unique one in this batch for how grimy it is.
That's cool. Now we've got more pictures, more artwork up on our website. If you go to the Athearn.com homepage and select the new announcements, go ahead to the PDF there, and then the new announcements for the SD60M. We've got 2 more that we're doing in this series that are for the same railroad, and they're all, even though they're all former UP, I think it's safe to say they're all pretty much they're their own locomotive.
Yep.
That's great.
They acquired a total of 10, 9 of which were the phase 1 or the Tri-Clops SD60Ms. So we picked three out of this batch, and 6022 is definitely my favorite. It's hard to see in this photo, but they actually have different colored window gaskets on the front. One of them is silver and the other 2 are black.
Wonder if we can see.
It would be the front of the cab.
Oh, the front of the cab. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to show that with the artwork.
Not
but
showing it, yeah.
That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, I'm with you, John. I might have to pick up one of these just because of the uniqueness of it. Is so cool. And
yeah, they're running through the railroad that I grew up on next to, which was weed infested, running Fairbanks Morse H1044s, and putting cars in the ground practically every month. And now we're running trains with SD60s on point. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
How much it's evolved.
Yeah. That's really cool. And if you guys out there that are watching this, if you have not seen the SD60M models in person, I actually have one here in the studio. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and let's see if I've got a good shot of it here. Yeah, there we go. And I'm going to minimize John just for a second. And there you go. Let me put some sound on this, see if you guys can hear it. So I'm going to turn the sound off so you can talk, John. I mean, those are phenomenal in the detail. And actually, I think this next run is probably going to have even more unique roads than what we offered the last time.
Yeah, the hardest part with picking railroads is we can only do so many.
Yeah.
And there's so many versions of, even within the same railroad, different timelines. So we try to hit the ones that people request. And it's important, if you want to be heard, you should be using our email address, the Athearn product suggestions, to send us to us, and we catalog them and get them on our schedule. So
yeah, I mean, like I was saying the other day for our announcements, I mean, I know you and the other developers, they actively read those comments and those emails that come in. So by all means, I know you enjoy going through all those different emails and seeing what people want.
Yeah, I do enjoy reading them, and I'll respond if I have a chance, but I can't spend all day fantasizing about what we're going to make next. I actually have to work on what we're going to make next.
Yeah, yeah. The easy part is dreaming up different roads. The hard part is actually doing the engineering behind it. So, well, John, thanks for coming on board. Really appreciate it. We've got time for maybe one or two questions, and then we got to let John and myself go. John, you got time for maybe one or two questions?
Sure.
All right. Let's see if I can find something out there. If you see something, let me know, and I'll throw it up there on the screen. Let's see.
There's a question about the ACUs, the SD70 ACUs.
Oh, okay. That's a good person to ask.
Yeah. So that's definitely the Canadian Pacific and Norfolk Southern SD70 ACUs, which is the rebuilt SD90 Max. Those are on the water right now. I can't remember which container they're in, but they're either being unloaded, have been unloaded, or are awaiting to be unloaded.
Yeah.
So they're coming soon. It's unfortunate they've been slowed down a little bit by the global disruption of things, but they're coming soon. And I have the production samples for a couple of them here, and they look great.
Yeah, I can't wait to see those. I mean, I was excited about them when we talked about them last year. Now that they're coming in, can't wait for them to come in and see them all. Let's see. Here's one, John, and I'm going to throw it up there, Eugene. He's got something long. I like to put guys up that take the time. Eugene's got a comment. He's like, hey, more truck models, new fire engines, new cab designs, MCI passenger coach buses, police Crown Victorias. Basically, I think what he's asking for is any plans of maybe doing some new vehicles in the near future.
Well, I recognize Eugene. He's a prolific user of our product suggestion email, which I love. And not only is he suggesting models, but he also sends photos, which really helps for some of these, myself being a vehicle illiterate for some of these unique versions. That always helps to understand what's being asked. We do have some vehicles in the works. Vehicles are definitely a hole in the hobby that we've identified that we want to spend more time on. It would be great if we saw the same return on vehicles as we do model trains, but unfortunately, I don't think people buy as many vehicles as they do train engines. But we do have something in the works coming up that I think people will be excited about.
I got one last question here for you, John. This is coming in from Chris. He says, hey, John, have you seen the BNSF SD60M with the PTC Ray configuration?
I think it's PTC Array. I think spell check on them. Yeah, the SD60Ms that we're doing do have a variation of the PTC antennas, 1405 specifically. But some of the ones that still exist in the Cascade Green that were also updated to SD60M-3 standards have a full PTC antenna arrangement on them. So we can offer that when it becomes available, or when we get around to doing it.
Great. Well, John, I'm going to let you go because I know you're busy. Somebody was asking how many locomotives and projects are in development at one time. I don't even know that answer.
Right now, there's one project on my desktop every single day for at least 10 hours a day. And I think everyone wants it bad. We've talked about it. It is coming real soon. But yeah, we have dozens of projects always being worked on. If we're not actively designing something, we're collecting information for a future project because we know folks want the new stuff.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, our customers as well as ourselves, we have a passion for this hobby, and it's definitely something that keeps you busy. I know that. So, John, I want to thank you once again for coming on board and sharing some time with us. We'll let you get back to it so we can daydream about some other projects that you can work for us. We'll let you go, John, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks. I'm sure I'll be back shortly.
So you heard it there, folks. John's working on a big project that you guys are going to be really excited about. So, and don't worry, we'll see more of John in the future, as well as Janik too. One more thing before we go, there was something I wanted to show you guys before we end this broadcast. You guys have been waiting for this, and as far as I know, you guys haven't seen this yet. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go down to the studio and see what's trackside real quick, and what we've got going on down there. So nothing yet. I don't see anything yet. Now, what do we got here? So there it is. Now, like John was saying, you know, there's been a lot of delays in shipping and such, but these are real close. This is one of the production samples of just one of the many different Dash 9s. And man, the GE sounds so cool, just sitting there purring away. So you Norfolk Southern guys, I know you're going to be pretty excited about this. We're just probably weeks away at this point to have these out and in your hand. So if you pre-ordered these, your dealer's probably going to be calling you probably before the end of the month. That's what we're hoping. We're kind of, like John was saying, we still have some shipping delays, but we're moving right along on these. And yeah, we're pretty excited about these too. So with that, I want to thank everybody for hopping on board with me this afternoon. And next week, just to let you know, we'll be talking more about some projects here. We're going to be talking about the Ready to Roll SD40-2s. And just a word to let you know, next week's broadcast will be pre-recorded. It will not be live. That's because we're going to be doing some interesting projects behind the scenes that you guys will be seeing at the beginning of the year. So stay tuned for that, but be sure to stay tuned. If you missed the show, always remember you can go to the YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and that way you can always see what's going on over here at Athearn. So until next time, do some modeling, get out there, have some fun, be happy, be healthy, be safe, and above all, high greens, everybody. Take care.